Hello everyone, I wanted to make a video today because a ridiculous situation happened in Washington, and I basically woke up in the morning and I was confronted with, as Joe Rogan would say, the most preposterous video I could have ever expected to be woken up to. The situation I'm alluding to is Donald Trump and his remarks about Ukraine. Now this is going to be a little rant I'm going to do just to make myself feel better. The situation is a bit ridiculous because Trump, who swears that he's not an ally of Putin, for years has been saying that, what? I mean, in eastern Ukraine they speak Russian, you know. Trump called Zelensky a dictator without elections. First of all, he's saying this to make Zelensky out as some sort of illegitimate leader. However, that's just simply not the case. I don't know why he's saying this. Way before Zelensky, he got elected in 2019. In the Ukrainian constitution, which, I don't know if you know this, it's actually the law, makes part of the law, during martial law, elections are postponed. Do I really need to explain why? Because obviously it's a horrible idea for your primary objective of the leader of your country to be campaigning and taking part in the democratic process during a complete state crisis where the survival of the state is of the utmost importance. Democracy is nice, but any leader will tell you that their PR and their image and campaigning takes up a lot of their time, because obviously if you're a leader, to get there you need to get elected. So taking out elections of the equation during wartime allows the leader to actually focus on the important things. And it's extremely ironic as well. After saying, well, Ukraine, you know, they're complaining about not being in the peace talks, and he's saying all this stuff about Zelensky. Let's look at the other party of the negotiations. He has no problem with the other party concerned, Russia, which is actually an illegitimate leader who changes his constitution to favourably rig elections and to stay in power. Prime Minister, President, rig elections, crack down on protests, have very thin, little to no democratic institutions in the country. But that's not a problem to Trump, because why would it be? You know, this is kind of goes back to the populist rhetoric. Within some populist research, there's this idea of direct democracy. Essentially, if there's a majority of people that want it, you know, then that will be the position of a populist. And Trump somehow has this idea that Putin's this big, strong, tough guy, this supreme leader, and he's under the impression that everyone loves Putin. He later says that Zelensky has a 4% approval rating, and he's done a horrible job, which is not true in a multitude of reasons. First of all, no, he doesn't have a 4% approval rating. He's just made that up, and if it's in quotations, he's just quoted in his own thoughts or his own head. He's quoted himself because he's just made up the statistic. The latest polls are showing whether it's worded what percentage of the population has trust or confidence in Zelensky. It's 57%, or whether his approval is all in the majorities, and it's actually increasing from recently. So no, this 4% thing is ironic to say the least, that Trump is saying Zelensky is an illegitimate leader, and by omission saying Putin is a legitimate leader that deserves to be taken seriously. Trump then goes on quoting Ukrainian officials in Ukraine. We weren't invited. You've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years ago. You should have never started it. I'm gonna need to take a deep breath for this one. I feel like I'm going mad explaining. What do you mean Ukraine started the war? Did the Ukraine start the war because they put the first soldiers in their own territory? It makes no sense. The war started because Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. What? Like, Russia didn't even give Ukraine an ultimatum or something, you know, at least back in the old days, you know, like a Mongol ultimatum or a Nazi Germany ultimatum. What choice did Ukraine have in this? Ukraine got invaded. Trump is equating defending yourself and not completely capitulating, as in saying to your military, don't fire back, don't respond, and let them kill Ukrainians, bomb Ukrainian villages and settlements and take the capital and illegitimately invade a sovereign territory and violate international law. If you resist that process, actually you've started the conflict. Trump then goes on to say Zelensky has done a terrible job, his country is shattered and millions have died unnecessarily, implying that this is somehow Zelensky's doing. This is blame attributed to Zelensky, which is, oh, I'm going insane, guys. I'm gonna be honest. I'm going insane because first of all, it just feels like it's opposite day. That Putin is the legitimate leader that deserves to be at the negotiating table, not the country actually affected by the war, not the country that's actually been invaded. Its population reduced from almost 50 million to like 37 million. Its economy being shattered. It's millions of Ukrainians being slaughtered because of Putin's actions and decisions. But somehow Putin is the righteous one here. Zelensky is the awful party here. And Putin and Russia's interests have to be represented. It's just a complete betrayal and flip of the world order that America has made post World War II. I just need to calm down. Also, this statement just portrays how dumb Trump is, because this reasoning for not including Ukraine in the peace negotiations shows that Trump doesn't actually even know what's going on, because Marco Rubio tried to save the situation, Trump's Secretary of State, by saying, oh, actually, yeah, these are just initial talks just to see whether we can establish levels of trust and whether we can actually do a deal in the first place. And he's adamant that Ukraine, and I think he said European partners will be included in later talks. Trump doesn't know that whole narrative. Trump doesn't know Marco Rubio's smart media sly escape. Trump's just said, "Oh yeah, no, why would Ukraine, the party where the theatre of the war is in, why would they be at the negotiating table?" It's just ridiculous. Yeah, just the absolute gall of Trump just to say, you've been there for 3 years and you should have ended it 3 years ago. I mean, Ukraine have been trying to end it. They've been trying to defeat Russia. You dumbass. Okay, sorry for the language. They've actually been resisting the invasion and done very well at it, at that, not to glaze Ukraine. But what was it? The original plan was to take Kiev in, 3 days? That the initial Russians deployed actually had parade uniforms with them, because the idea was to take Ukraine within a couple of days, and install a puppet government and have the whole ordeal over with. This has been a complete failure from Russia. The fact that the war's been going on for 3 years. Russia, comparable to its army size, has suffered extremely humiliating losses. And if anything, from their relative starting positions and their relative staging in the world power rankings, Ukraine has the advantage there, technically. That Ukraine is putting up a much better fight than Russia is. And the fact that Ukraine can't win this war and we're going to refuse to help Ukraine because, Ukraine should have just either capitulated or given up a bunch of land at the beginning to stop this war, is ridiculous, because no one thought Ukraine was going to last this long anyway. There's a multiplicity of examples where America tries to help nations, like for example Afghanistan in the dying moments, and their police force and their army kind of just gives up. Ukraine's been resolute in that sense. They've really wanted this. They don't want to go down to Russia, and Trump's just completely illiterate in this whole situation. It's just really frustrating, because ultimately, guys, this is the ultimate litmus test. Replace Ukraine with America. Replace Ukraine with France. And then none of these arguments are logical at all. Russia invades France. France puts up a fight. France is now culpable for starting the war. No, obviously not. Like, Russia invades America because they've actually been plotting against Russian security interests and threatening Russia with NATO, so Russia's done a preemptive strike and invaded America. Oh, this is America's fault. America should engage in negotiations and actually compromise with Russia and concede some concessions. No, that's just completely ridiculous. It's not America's fault. It's Russia's fault, and Russia should not be rewarded for breaking international law and essentially disrespecting another nation's sovereignty. You shouldn't be rewarded for that in the international system. Otherwise, ding ding ding, we all want peace. If violence is rewarded, just like giving candy to a baby, it's gonna happen again. So I don't know. Just kind of sick of this. Alright, love you guys. We're essentially back to the post World War II isolationist versus interventionist world agenda, and specifically American agenda, where America had a choice. It found itself at the head of a new world order post World War II, and there were many voices, don't get it wrong, there were many voices within the Republican Party that were isolationist. You know, for example, the forces that Eisenhower, etc., ran against in the Republican Party. And many people wanted American first policy. You know, earlier today I was looking at some historical photos, and you could see protests in New York City saying, you know, there's an ocean between us and Hitler, and leave Hitler out of this. This is not America's war. You know, American for the Americans, Europe for the Europeans. Very similar to the rhetoric being echoed nowadays. And obviously the Nazi sympathizing with the Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden in 1939 in America. And a whole attitude of, you know, Europe's problems are Europe's problems, and America should only look at its own self-interest. You know, this realist, you know, relative gains perspective that other countries should worry about themselves and America should only focus on itself. Obviously, America leading a global alliance is beneficial for America. In any alliance or organization, the person who has the most power and who forms the organization benefits the most from it. So obviously there have been some relevant points brought up by Trump, where he would say, well, NATO countries aren't paying their 2%, they aren't paying their fair share, and America's subsidizing them for... You know, there are some relatively decent points there that that Europeans have been slacking when it comes to being on top of their militaries and everything. But ultimately, NATO is to the benefit of America. Instead of an American army, you have a NATO army now. And what was the NATO army for? Or sorry, what was NATO for? It's to protect American security interests against the containment of communism, of the spread of communism. Now it's not the spread of communism, but it's the spread of Russian imperialism with Soviet inspiration. So you could equate it to the spread of communism, except it's not really the spread of communism anymore. It's actually the spread of right-wing nationalist authoritarianism, which is why you see many right-wingers, in fact, nowadays, whereas they would have been completely unhappy with the expansion of the Soviet Union because they're communist, are elated and bending over backwards, bootlicking for Putin and Russia currently in their situation in Ukraine. And you'll hear many excuses. Oh, well, actually, you know, NATO's on Russia's doorstep, and they were provoking Russia, and Russia had to do this for their own defense and their own security objectives. First of all, no one's asking Russia to be hostile towards the West and towards NATO. It's only a purely defensive military pact. But let's forget all the basic arguments. As a result, obviously, Finland and Sweden joined NATO, so Finland has one of the longest European borders of Russia. That's gone to NATO. You know, Finland wasn't... Why wasn't Finland selected as a target before? It seems that there's something more qualitative than just it's just NATO. Ultimately, it's about power and influence. If you're a country like Kazakhstan, who could have historically been influenced by the power of Russia, then you're safe, you're not threatened, because Russia can indirectly direct you to do certain things that collide that coincide with their own national interest. So you're not a threat. If you're Azerbaijan, Russia's not really directly looking to invade you because Azerbaijan, you're not looking to join NATO. Obviously, Azerbaijan's an interesting example because, against Russia, in a more cultural, spiritual sense, as in, like the whole Turkey and Armenia relations and dynamics. However, if you're a Georgia or a Ukraine or an Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and you want to join NATO, suddenly the situation is completely apathetic, and you're going to get invaded like Georgia, and you're going to get invaded like Ukraine, because ultimately you're not seen as a sovereign territory that can make its own decisions about its own security. It's ultimately down to Russia's power and Russia's soft influence, Russia's hard influence, and Russia's ability to essentially keep the old Soviet bloc intact, to exert as much power and coercion as possible, because ultimately it's a power game. What does Putin want? A powerful Russia, a powerful legacy, and essentially the Russian Empire. He doesn't want a cooperative, small Russia, a democratic Russia, most definitely not, because then you're going to get a fractured state. Chechnya is going to get independence, North Caucasian states are going to get independence, Siberian states are going to get independence, Finnish, Nordic-esque states getting independence. You're going to have no power if you're Putin, because now you're democratic and you're going to get voted out, and you're going to be responsible for your own actions. So yeah, it's horrible.
Oh yeah, welcome back guys. This is me in post edit and let's read a quick article together about what's happened recently. US votes against UN resolution condemning Russia for the Ukraine war. Honestly, I have no words. It was actually the only three countries that voted against the resolution were Russia, North Korea, and America. The American betrayal of their ally Ukraine needs to be studied, honestly.